Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final segment of our series countdown to the US presidential election. Since we last met, a lot has transpired. It's been quite a ride. We do have the election results. In previous talks, we did talk about possible delays and we talked about possible violence. Both of those things have occurred. But here, this is where we are. We had record turnout in this election. Joe Biden received the most votes that any US president has ever received. Things were a little different this year with the COVID pandemic, where we had to do a lot of mail-in ballots and there was a lot of opposition towards that. We had very close state result, whatever, where we've had to have some recounts. We had to have a runoff election in Georgia, which has been, the results are that both of the Democrats won and the Democrats now do hold control over the Senate, with Kamala Harris being the deciding vote. Georgia flipped blue this year. That was a big deal. I guess I'm kind of going out of order. Trump did claim victory on election night, and through that painful delay, we had to sit and wonder, and we've had a lot of Republicans join his cause. He held a rally on January 6th and incited a crowd who was already really inflamed because they believed Trump's claim that the election was stolen and that it wasn't fair. So you had a lot of mad people, and you had people organized. They went to the Capitol. 5 people died. It was surreal to watch that this is happening in our country. But President Trump, or former President Trump, he left early in the morning on Inauguration Day. There was a peaceful inauguration. It was beautiful. I don't know if any of you caught the 22-year-old poet, but wow, woo, future president. She was amazing. And I think I'm just gonna kind of leave it there for my opening. Let's welcome the team, this awesome team. We've got Daniel Fiverson, Chad Harris, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, Mitchell Lewis, Sue Hillyard, and myself, Stacie Pazura. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, Stacie.
Hi, Stacie.
Everyone.
Hi,
Stacie.
Hi. So what do y'all think of this?
Congratulations to our country for a peaceful transfer of power.
Yes.
And by the way, your introduction about Joe Biden having the most votes ever, the second most votes ever were to Donald Trump this year.
Right. That is true.
You have to keep that in mind. I mean,
that is true.
This was the largest turnout ever, and both of them hit a milestone. So
right.
It's worth.
Very
good. Some of us would like to take that milestone and hit one or the other of them.
When President Biden ever speaks before the joint houses of Congress, for the first time in history, 2 women will be sitting behind him.
Great.
Indeed. Oh yeah. Let's just talk about that. These cabinet picks, or who he has nominated. Listen to this. First woman to head the Pentagon. First woman to head the National Intelligence, first woman to head Treasury, first African American nominated as Secretary of Defense, first Native American woman to head Department of Interior, which I personally love, because this is where you have public lands, the protection.
Go to Mexico.
Yes, I mean, the Native Americans deserve this. So I love it. First Latino to head Homeland Security, first Latino to head Department of Health and Human Services, first openly gay transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, and the first time a climate czar has been appointed to the cabinet. So Joe Biden promised that he would fill the cabinet with a team that looked like America, and I think that he is absolutely delivering. And it's my hope that all of these people are confirmed.
Not
What
to
do you all
mention,
think?
not to mention Bernie as chairman of the budget committee.
Mm,
That
there you
is huge. That is huge.
yeah,
But
right.
the question of confirmation is still very important. They're not all going to get a walk right in. It's going to be a fight.
It's true. Yeah. Well, so what do y'all think about what's been going on?
Well, as I was saying earlier, before we started, my sister said, I think the country just breathed a collective sigh of relief
Hmm.
now that it's all over and we can get on with the healing now.
I agree. I have some clients and friends whose politics are, let's say, different than mine. And most of them are accepting this. There's only a few who are still fighting against it. Most of them understand that America is a centrist country. If we go too far to the left or too far to the right, we pull it back in. And that's essentially what happened. And that's why Bernie and Elizabeth Warren didn't get the nomination, because it wasn't their time. Whatever, you can say that about anything. When Biden got the nomination, I went on Facebook and I wrote, or actually when he was elected, and I wrote, Joe, it took you 40 years to get here, and you're right on.
Yes, right on cue. And I do tend to lean left, and I like progressive agendas. However, I absolutely agree that right now what we need is to center. We need to center. We need to get everyone on board. We need to heal, and I think he's the perfect person to do it. So,
He was a good.
But Stacie, don't kid yourself. He's going to do some things that are pretty progressive.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. For one thing, an infrastructure bill is absolutely mandatory. Our highways and bridges and tunnels and subways are falling apart.
What did you have, Daniel?
Well, I've got Virgo rising, so you guys have to forgive me. I meet the world with my Virgo, but I still am. I think I said this, online yesterday, Stacie, that to some degree I'm still not on the edge of my seat, but I'm still, a little bit wary, because we know the nature of who. He who shall be shamed, forever shameless, or forever not shameless. I don't know how that goes. I still find it hard to believe that he's just going to go, fade into the woodwork. There's nothing that he has done in his entire lifetime that would point to anything like that happening. So that's all. I mean, I don't want to be a fear monger. I'm more of a realist, but I just like to, I don't want us to have too much of a false sense of security, in spite of the gift that we've been given.
But Daniel, what are you worried about? He's obviously never going to go. He's not going to be back in the White House. He can certainly stir up trouble and get on media and do things like that.
Mitchell, I just don't see him sitting there and waiting for the Southern District of New York to unload their guns on him. I mean,
Oh no, he's looking for a villa in Greece.
Yeah. So, yeah, again, this is still unfolding. This is Aquarius, guys, and this is sudden, this is unexpected, disruptive. We're still in a world where anything can happen. That's all I'm going to say.
My Virgo's with you, Daniel. For 4 years of waiting for the other shoe to drop, you can't forget that.
I've been waiting since 9/11, Sue.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I hear you.
So
I think one of the lessons here is that we shouldn't forget it. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I just, all the hysterics about Inauguration Day, what I wrote on Facebook was, this is a radical change. That's what Mars, Uranus, and Saturn and Jupiter going into Aquarius want. And that's what we got. We didn't get a military attack again. was the 6th. I'm forgetting that. What we got was a radical change in our government. And Kamala Harris, how much more radical could it be, considering what we just came from?
Right. Yeah, I agree. We're looking at a long-term change in the structure of power in the United States.
Right.
But how it's going to play out and what that cycle looks like, to some degree, remains to be seen.
And there's
And it
always
has to last
backsliding and backlash, and back and forth. So, we'll get there.
It has to last longer than 4 years,
Right.
or it won't stay.
Right.
That's why FDR was so successful, because he was elected 4 times. Granted, he died shortly after his 4th election, but it took him, most of that time to create the changes that we grew up with. While he started things like Social Security and the Tennessee Valley Authority and all of these banking and restrictions, things like that, to stabilize the country. And he did most of that in the first, he started most of them in the first 100 days. Many of these programs weren't implemented for years. It takes a long time. We see how long it takes in our country. So if one party, I don't want to make this political, I can try not to, but if one party can hold on to power long enough to make some big changes, those changes occur. If it keeps flipping back and forth every 4 years, even every 8 years, we only get so much done.
There's a deeper undercurrent as well, because the right wing has been organizing tremendous wealth. Corporate wealth has been embedded into conservative policy since the Reagan years, and the left is kind of, everything's going to be okay, and the stock market's up, and I'm going to Paris next year, and people have really kind of, the left there's been complacency, and this is what is encouraging about this year, especially, is that the left is waking up, and they're recognizing, and they came out in the record numbers. It's what had to happen, but it's what hasn't happened, and it's why we've ended up where we are. So the question is, will this maintain its momentum, going forward, or will there, as history has shown, be counter forces against that forward progressive momentum?
Well,
But Dan, you don't forget there were times in our more recent past when it was the left that was extremely active, and the right sat. Go back to the 1960s.
I think we have to recognize that this is a dramatic shift that's taken place. It's not just, this isn't just standard normal back to operating procedure. We had the first Black African-American president elected, and then we had a racist white supremacist elected, and he was a psychopath, and he was negated. He tried to overthrow the democracy. It was put down, and he destroyed the Republican Party. The Republican Party is in 2 pieces right now. They're not just going to come back and operate as they were. That's not what's happening. And what also is happening is a momentum shift, like the moral arc of the universe, I believe, will be seen to have pivoted at this point, not just a bend. This is this was the last gasp of white supremacy trying to take power in the world, and definitely in the United States. And it was put down, and we'll see what the backlash, the Saturn-Uranus square, as was the Civil War, a very challenging period, and there will be back and forth conservative and progressive movements. But one party has been completely diminished, or diminished in a really profound way, and the other party has, like you said, woken up and realized a lot of things that I think we were taking for granted, and we have a real progressive movement. I mean, what Biden is saying, unity, and it's a backlash to the demagoguery and the racism that we just endured. So I think personally, I have a lot of positive perspective on it, but I think we have to recognize that it's more of a transition and more of a transformation than we recognize in the immediate moment.
It's a very liminal space where it's a revolving door in a lot of ways, where There's tremendous vortex of energy that we're passing through that has great potentials in all directions.
Well, when you look at the Jupiter-Saturn, you know, the great change, you know, from the Earth signs into the air signs. I mean, we're in the midst of this Jupiter-Saturn transition into the air signs, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's the future, and yippee.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was kind of what I also was thinking is like, it's more than just like the last gasp of white supremacy. And it may not be like the last gasp, but it's more than that. It's the shadow of the modern worldview. Like modernity, it's a materialist, is a big shadow of who we are. Racism, big shadow. Misogyny, patriarchy is a big shadow of the modern identity. And Trump represents that in a hyper realized sense. Like, you know, if you take the modern enlightenment racist orientation and capitalist materialist orientation, he's the Ubermensch of that, where nothing else matters other than your own, you know, capitalist wealth, and fuck the environment and everything else. That ideology is dying. The environment is being realized as more sacred and what should be taken care of. It's more than just, you see what I'm saying? Like I think we're seeing a larger shift, a larger transformation than just Democrat, Republican, 4 years, 8 years. This is something much more dramatic, in my opinion.
There is, but we need to see outside our personal bubble, our community bubble. We all still live in a bubble. We live with friends who agree with us. We live in communities that support our own beliefs and lifestyles. 70 million people voted for him. That's a big number to, you know, just sweep under the rug. So we have to be able to get outside ourselves and our own perspectives to really encompass what, you know, other people may see, because otherwise we really don't see the big picture.
Yeah.
Look, these issues aren't American issues. These are human issues. Racism, financial inequality, all of this goes back to living in caves. Essentially, if you want to look at it, you know, in terms of the Aquarian age, which is such a misconceived notion. We don't enter an age, we morph into an age, and it takes hundreds of years. But we are at a place, which I think we all pretty much agree, that if we don't deal with the environment and with some of these issues, we're doomed. It's as simple as that. But it wasn't just an American issue or a couple of hundred years. We're looking at thousands and thousands of years. You know, we say that democracy started in ancient Athens. That's true for the few thousand citizens who were free.
Right.
They had tens of thousands of slaves.
Right.
So their concept of democracy as a philosophy was great, but they didn't live it. We're doing a better job in a way than any other society ever has. Up till now.
12 American presidents had slaves.
Right, exactly. So I agree with you, Chad. I think that's exactly what's happening. I think we're at a much bigger place. And, you know, if we limit it to our own little neighborhood, astrologers would refer to this as the Pluto return, because Pluto represents everything that is an infection, that is buried, that's hidden, that needs to come to the surface. And that's what Trump did.
Yeah.
He brought all of this to the surface. He didn't create it. He just said, yeah, it's okay. Put on your, you know, your hats and your white, you know, hoods, and, you know, go carry on. Actually, take the hoods off. We don't care what you look like. So
He's the catalyst.
Really, sorry, Sue?
He was the catalyst.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are many who are, you know, and throughout history, as they say, the times make the man. Sometimes the man makes the times. And, you know, there's a new book out about strong men from Mussolini till today. I forget who wrote it. Sort of being shown on MSNBC. And Mussolini was Hitler's hero. Mussolini started years before Hitler came to power. And he was a big, tough, strong, and look what happened to him. They hung him upside down from a lamppost when it was over. You know? And in a way, that's what we're seeing now. Now, Chad, I agree with you, or I forget, Daniel, I'm not sure which of you said it. Trump isn't going to disappear, nor really should he, because we need to be reminded. But you may notice that, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. He lost the election. Look at how many people, look at Mike Pence showing up for the inauguration. We're going to see Mitch McConnell change his tune, not sufficiently to sing an aria, but there are changes happening here. Why? Trump said it perfectly. I like people who win. I don't like people who lose. Well, you know what? We don't like people who lose. You lost. I'm not talking about me personally or making this political. His own party is starting to say, oh my God, what are we going to do? Some of them are going to continue to stay on that road, but a lot of them are going to disappear because he lost. If he had won again, I don't even want to get into that conversation.
I think in each and every case, we are each our own worst enemy, collectively, individually. So, yeah.
Daniel, you remember Pogo, the
Sure.
famous Pogo commercial, cartoon?
I
have met the enemy, and they
he-
are us. Right.
He's us, right?
It's great,
Right.
especially with the pandemic. Stay away from me. You might have it. I don't mean to make light of the pandemic, by the way.
Right. Well, I'm really interested to hear from Michaela. What's your viewpoint from France?
Well, yeah, I feel a bit of, I'm looking at the outside a little bit, but yeah, obviously everyone's looking at America. It's in the spotlight, as I said before. And I think it was so inspiring. I mean, it was just yesterday watching that inauguration. It was, it was more than, you could expect. It was so moving from the beginning with the flags substituting for the people who couldn't be there and the people who died in the States and the reflecting pool and the I used to live in Washington years ago. I spent 7 years there because my sister's husband was in the government, and so it was, it brought all that back to me too. So it had an extra layer of sentimentality, but even without that, it was incredibly moving. And I just wonder, without, like I said before, the antagonist, without that happening, without the Uranian, Martian input, Plutonian, Saturnian, Jupiterian, God knows what input, and the symbolism of it all, and people's how they behaved, with events being what it was, as traumatic as it was, it wouldn't have had the same moving depth. And so, and in these times when we these are such deeply dark times anyway, and we seem to be sinking deeper in the mire, it was inspiring to rise, to see the everyone rise to the occasion and rise out and go higher, as Michelle Obama says. When someone goes lower, you go high. And they just did that with huge aplomb. And it was hugely, I think the world was just aghast with, wow, this is America at its best. And it was wonderful. Yeah.
Joe Biden's Jupiter sits on America's Mercury, and he certainly expressed that. Whereas Donald Trump's full moon sits on America's Mars and squares its Neptune. So he comes from fear, and Joe Biden comes from optimism.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful.
Also, don't forget that France is having its own issues. Germany is about to lose their leader, and Poland and Hungary have gone to the right, and Brazil is, and this is a whole world.
It's amazing.
And I'm glad. Don't take this the wrong way. I don't mean it this way, but having a worldwide pandemic, we've broken down borders.
True.
Everybody's dealing with it.
Yes.
It brings
Somebody
my
sneezes in New York, somebody in Beijing says Gesundheit, so.
Exactly. We are one, we are connected, and what could show it better than, unfortunately, it took a virus to do it, the smallest thing on earth.
Well, that reminds me of the very end of War of the Worlds.
Ah, yes.
H.G. Wells was so brilliant. What kills the Martians after everything we've tried is the common cold.
I know, brilliant.
As he wrote that God in the smallest thing that God in his infinite wisdom had placed upon the earth. Really, that's just, really touches,
Yeah, so moving.
I think we're seeing Maslow's hierarchy of need, because right now we just got the equivalent of just food, shelter, and clothing, and we're all thrilled to death.
right? And it's great, but Daniel, isn't that what it's all about, really?
Yeah, yes.
I know people who are worth billions of dollars and they're
Uranus
miserable sons of bitches. And I know people haven't got enough,
It's Uranus and Taurus. I mean, we're learning what's really essential here.
Turned our values upside down.
Right.
Exactly. Which they needed to be tipped up, as you say. It's, needed to go full circle.
Look, I'm an emotional cancer, real, emotional slob. And every Christmas I watch Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life and Miracle on 34th Street. I can't help it. I just sit there, and they always get me.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it?
They all have the same thing.
Mitchell, I have Mercury in Cancer. I was overclamped yesterday. Trust me.
I believe it. I was in tears. I admit it. Oh, I was so happy to see it. I mean, and I'll tell you something that I got a great joy out of was seeing George W. Bush. It's not about one party or another, although we too tend to stay in our tribes. But this was a mensch. He came out and he said, look, first of all, he said, I'm no longer the worst president you ever had, so I'm very happy to be here. But he was there with the rest of them, and it was great.
Yeah. Seeing them all gather together like that. Yeah, exactly. In unity. It's wonderful.
Indeed. An incredible finish to a very, well, I don't know if nothing is ever finished, but to a very intense and chaotic time. So I think this is a good time to start the presentations that our speakers have prepared today. We're going to start with Chad Alexander Harris. Welcome, Chad.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Let's see. And do you see the Groff-Tarnas perinatal sequence? Great. Okay, so for those of you who probably don't know, the archetypal astrological perspective developed by Richard Tarnas actually emerged out of Stan Groff's LSD research. So Stanislav Grof is one of the foremost, hold on, I'm gonna mute my, sorry for the loud noise behind me. So Stan Grof is one of the preeminent LSD or psychedelic therapists in history. He was one of the first psychotherapists to be issued LSD in 1955, and he studied it and did therapeutic work with thousands of patients from 55, 56 up through 1968, where the communists, the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia, and he fled and came to the United States. And led the last legally funded LSD research at Johns Hopkins University or hospital from 68 to 72. So what he recognized in his research, which is genuinely profound, is that when people go into non-ordinary states of consciousness, they revert on LSD or any psychedelic generally, often, they can revert back to birth, the actual birth experience itself. And so he was watching patients go into these states, and he was able to identify 4 distinct stages of the birth process itself. And so the first matrix, BPM1, is associated with the planet Neptune, and it corresponds to the intrauterine existence that you have up until the first contraction. When the first contraction happens, it begins the second matrix, which is associated with Saturn, and until the cervix dilates, you are in the second matrix. You are trapped. All the pressures are coming in around at you. It feels incredibly anxiety producing. Neptune, the first matrix, if it's a good womb, you're in heaven, as long as the good relationship and the mother's not on drugs, that type of thing. This is genuinely generally perceived and experienced as a positive state. And then at first contraction, and before the cervix dilates, this is generally experienced as wholly negative. There is very little, if any, positive experience in the state at all. It's not until the cervix dilates and you actually feel as though you were moving out of the birth canal that positive experience and ideology comes into your imagination or into your experience. Basically, you feel as though you were in heaven and you've cast out into hell. And until the cervix dilates, you are trapped and there's nowhere to go. It's a no exit situation. It's all the negative sides of the Saturn archetype, right? And then when the cervix dilates, Pluto is the third matrix, and it's a transformative death rebirth process. You are moving through the birth canal and a tremendous struggle to be born, struggle to breathe, and tremendous violence being put onto you. And you are also potentially causing violence against the womb because of your struggle to breathe and to be born. And then the fourth matrix corresponds to the planet Uranus, which is the breakthrough, the actual delivery itself, the new awakening, the new horizons, all new realities. All new reality comes into your experience. So Rick recognized the archetypal correlations to the four matrices when they both discovered astrology in 1976. Rick was able to identify those qualities and recognize that the four stages actually correspond to the four outer planets of our solar system archetypally. Now, so the reason I bring this up is because it seems as though it's very possible, and this is Stan Grof's hypothesis, is that the roots of aggression, of human aggression, in many ways are actually rooted in the birth experience itself. That, you know, it's like this actually, I'm going to give a specific example, like sadomasochistic sexual bondage and discipline type of ideology. Often, or it is recognized now that it has its source in the birth trauma itself, because this is the fourth matrix, Pluto. You're often male children are born with erections. They are actually having a sexual experience, their first sexual experience, in the titanic struggle to be born and to breathe. And they think this is part of why people like to be strangled during sexuality, because it brings back to that trauma that the organism is trying to go back to the trauma to heal it. And that's why ultimately, like, why people seek out abusive partners over and over again, because it's a certain trauma in the organism, and the organism is seeking healing, and it does it through misguided attempts to recreate the trauma at the source. So, okay, a reason I bring all of this up is because, and then here's real quick, this is the ego consciousness, and these are the perinatal birth processes in the birth experience itself. This is all of the transpersonal unconscious, and the archetypal dimension of reality is all beneath. And this is why the birth chart works ultimately. Like, you know, it's the titanic struggle to be born, the pressures, the archetypal dynamics that are present at the moment that you are born, as to why, and it's why they reflect our complexes. So here, I'm going to go through this is the Saturn-Pluto cycle. Just after the Civil War is the Saturn-Pluto opposition. This is when the Ku Klux Klan was formed. And real quick, like the Saturn, like part of what's happening is Saturn is defenses and your boundaries and protective strategies in order to survive, right? And Pluto is what we fear and what we project as evil onto the other. And when the Saturn-Pluto combination comes in the sky, there's a tendency for more psychological splitting, more boundary intensification, and more othering and projecting the evil onto the feared other. And the idea is that you're striving to protect white people or whatever it is, and you project evil onto Black people, and they have to be destroyed in order for your survival to maintain. And so you can see this again, this in the 1882 to 84 is a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and it was the Chinese Exclusion Act, the first immigration act against other people in the United States, the same ideology. 1913 to 14, 16, World War I, again, another psychological splitting moment, but this is when the Ku Klux Klan rebirth after the release of Birth of a Nation. Then in the next alignment, Saturn-Pluto square, beginning of World War II, in the Holocaust, you see clearly the psychological splitting and othering taking place on like a dramatic scale through the Nazis. And then 1994, 92, 94 was the genocide in Rwanda, very clear, distinct, kind of rapid immersion or ascent of psychological splitting in a tight community where it ended up in like 850,000 people being murdered by machete. Now, what's really interesting, the reason I bring this up is because the Ruby Ridge incident took place in 1992. And if you're not familiar with it, it was like people who wanted to, had gun rights, and it was in Idaho, and they were, he was a separatist and he wanted to maintain his own gun rights, and the feds came to arrest him, and there was a shootout, and the feds killed his wife, and I'm not sure, but he ended up going to jail. And what happened is the white supremacists and Nazis and anti-government forces in the United States took this as an important event where the government, Saturn, was encroaching on their rights to bear arms, Pluto. You know, our rights to be free and to have our own weapons was being taken away from them. And then the next, at Waco happened in 1993. This is also during the Saturn square Pluto event. And again, another incident where the government, Saturn, is coming in to take the weapons away from the Branch Davidians. And that was the reason behind it. Now, what happened in 1994 was Newt Gingrich and the Republicans swept Congress. And in the exit polling for that election, the highest voted upon reason for the Republicans was they were voting against Clinton's assault weapons ban. So assault weapons is Pluto, the ban is Saturn. So Clinton was wanting to ban weapons, and the white supremacists, they surged and took Congress with Republicans because in part because of this issue. But what takes place just after this is the Oklahoma City bombing by a white supremacist, Timothy McVeigh, who was directly inspired by Ruby Ridge and Waco to bring to commit the Oklahoma City bombing. So the reason I bring all of this up is because that's again what we're seeing at the Capitol. This is I'm just going to skip in 2011, the next Saturn or the next one. Well, actually, if you go back 9/11, this was a white supremacist war on terror. It was almost an extension of the Crusades, which also have Saturn-Pluto alignments. So you can see another giant white supremacist war. But then in 2011, Anders Breivik, who you may or may not know is the Norwegian, who had a horrific white supremacist mass shooting where he shot the children of the leaders of Norway. He ambushed them on a private island and killed all these children. And he did it so that the leaders of the liberals in the future would not be there, so that right-wing people could come into power and keep immigrants out of Norway. That was literally the reason he did it. The guy who shot up in New Zealand last year in Christchurch, he did his shooting modeled on Norway. He was admiring this guy. So like the white supremacists, they identify with these killers who do their actions during Saturn-Pluto periods, and they identify with it, and they want to commit it as themselves. So here's the point I'm ultimately trying to make, is that when we saw the insurrection on the 6th, the reason that those people felt motivated to storm the government was because they were being told that their freedoms were being taken away from them. They were being told that their country had been stolen from them, that the election had been stolen, and their rights, the right, the mask wearing, whatever, to breathe, that their freedoms were being taken away from them. And so what happens? They resonate with the Saturn-Pluto archetypal energy of threat from the government or whatever, taking away your rights, and their desire to protect their violent impulses and their ability to bear arms, and they're willing to put their lives on the line for it. So what we're seeing, like, I mean, all of the perinatal dynamics are at play. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction is in the sky, and people are more identified with splitting and othering to begin with, and then the idea that their rights may be actually be taken away from them, or their freedom or their country is being stolen from them. And look at, the actual Civil War, the US Civil War, began April 12th, 1861, with a Mars-Uranus conjunction square to Saturn, just like we have in the insurrection chart. Mars-Uranus conjunction square to Saturn. Now, people, this is a good example of wide orbs. Like, this is clearly a Mars-Uranus conjunction on the 6th, and that kind of release valve, that energy, in my mind. And yes, there were lots of protection on the 6th or on inauguration day to protect from more violence, but in a sense, the charge was released. Mars had been, squaring Saturn and Pluto for 4 months, and it was just moving out of that alignment and into the conjunction with Uranus, and that the liberation for, or the the awakening for violent action for your freedom. I mean, Jupiter was square to Uranus. This is the birth moment. Uranus is the fourth matrix, but the American Revolution happened during a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. The French Revolution, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. The Arab Spring, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So it's the emancipatory impulse for freedom, for revolution, and to do it with violence. So you see what's happening. Like, that impulse is in the air. The human psyche is identifying with it. And in particular, people who have, my guess is that it's people who have a lot of trauma surrounding their own Saturn-Pluto coex systems, their own complexes, related often, most likely, to their own birth, that when the rhetoric gets whipped up and they're identifying with that principle of, like, struggling to breathe, and it's an existential threat that their existence may no longer be possible if this thing doesn't happen, or if something else happens. So, like, you can see, does this make any sense? So, like, why people are, identifying with this rhetoric that other people are not necessarily, but some people are, and it's a resonance effect that there's something in their psyche that's seeking healing, that's stuck in that Saturn-Pluto trauma. And yeah, so, like, when your psyche is whipped up into that feverish pitch of, I'm not going to survive, my existence requires this act, this is where I think we can see why people felt it was necessary for them to storm the Capitol. So there's a lot more. I mean, like what Trump actually did, I mentioned this in the last talk, is that it was the eclipse on his sun and moon that it revealed his pure shadow, like his pure corrupt betrayal, like totally without dignity and integrity. Like, he has none of that, and all of it came fully fledged. Like, we all, it was hinting the whole time, it was there the whole time, but he performed it. He had it he consecrated it. He made it real, that he incited the violence and betrayed his country, everyone, his own vice president. So that's what I was saying before, is just there's something I think really revealing and important about his presidency, and like the way he illuminated the shadow in us, the racism in us, and the pathology in us. I mean, look at the neurosis. Like, there's so much pathology in our society that we, may have known about a little bit, but now it's right out in front of us. I mean, and yeah, so I feel like it's a tremendous healing function he's performing because of the transparency in which he's doing it, and the shadow possession that's causing it, and honestly his incompetence. Like that is what allowed it to happen. Like, it wasn't even possible for the insurrection to have worked. There was nothing to actually change on that day. It couldn't have actually threatened the democracy. It wasn't really. I mean, it was, because it could have killed Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, and it would have been a horror show. But like, they couldn't have actually overthrown the election. I mean, even if Pence had said, no, I don't want to vote or whatever, it's a pro forma event. It doesn't actually matter. So like, that's my point, is that like, he got all these people to go and commit this act that wouldn't have worked anyway, no matter what. It's just completely incompetent, and shows us, everything. It revealed the betrayal, the shadow, the corruptness, the insanity, all of it. And so I'm just super blessed and thinking positively about all of that's happened. Yes, 5 people died. It could have been a lot worse. But
Indeed. Thank you, Chad. That was
welcome.
remarkable. I wasn't aware of this birthing matrix. You've really illuminated my mind today. And it's interesting that in that 4th matrix, that it's ruled by Uranus. And, right now we have the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury in Aquarius being ruled by Uranus and Taurus, which it is being squared. So this is truly a birthing moment. It's something completely new. It's the future that's being birthed. It's, via the square, we have a struggle here. But what you said about everything kind of becoming front and center. Uranus is also objectification. And so all of these horrific events really are helping us to objectify what our collective body is about. And it's very important, because if you don't know what it is, you can't do anything about it. It just works from the subconscious. So
yeah, Uranus is helping to illuminate and show us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the Jupiter Uranus, like, they were experiencing it as revolution in 1776, but for us it's like, Georgia elections, like, that's a revolutionary, democratic, progressive breakthrough, and so and even potentially with Biden, and honestly, like, we'll see. But what he called for yesterday, in unity and all this, I mean, it's absolutely the best thing we could have asked for, and it wouldn't have happened without Trump. There's something important about what Trump has done that's pushing us towards, doubling down on what's good, to the positive, to the good, to the collective good, to the common good, all these things that were just thrown out. So
absolutely agreed. That's why they say evil exists, right?
exactly.
So
we can see what good really looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you, Chad. That was fantastic.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And now we're going to move to our next speaker, Michaela Villiers-Kendall from France. Welcome, Michaela.
Thanks, Stacie. Yeah, well, I mean, what Chad said, that's really interesting, actually. I mean, I just wanted to mention quickly this book, Understanding the Future, which is, if you haven't read that, that's a very good thing. That it's sort of going out of date now, because it sort of began a few years ago, but the last dates it mentions is 2020, 21. And this is by Lynn Burbeck, who's a very good astrologer. but he mentioned prejudice and paranoia here. And he's talking about 2021 as well. And he says, prejudice, this is like a poisonous gas that has been forever circulating on the airwaves. And so he's saying that this time is about, these transits we're having now. And he wrote this, well, I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, more probably. And he says, so prejudice is about everyone who has been poisoned by the gas of prejudice helps to create and spread that gas, which is pretty much every soul on the planet apart from a very few. So prejudice lives within us all to some degree. As Chad said, it's a survival mechanism that we mostly consciously, if we have a balanced, pretty balanced consciousness, we manage to check it and rationalize it. And if we have empathy and if we have goodwill to our fellow men, we have less and less prejudice. But there's prejudice of some sort in everyone, of some kind. Anyway, he also says paranoia, and this is simply prejudice squared or multiplied by itself, escalating by its own pernicious momentum. Prejudice to paranoia is like a detonator to a bomb. And identify your own prejudices and you diffuse the bomb of paranoia. And identifying the prejudices is exactly what this time is about. And like Chad said, Trump illuminated, he's illuminated our prejudices and our paranoia, just like the virus has, the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And symbolized amazingly in his natal lunar eclipse right across the USA's chart, Mars in 21 degrees Gemini, conjunct his sun, and opposed by his moon, of course, because he was born on the lunar eclipse, and of course being squared now by Neptune. And in the Sibley chart, and this is the secondary progression I put up here because we looked at the natal chart last time. But it was interesting, it caught my eye that the secondary progressions of the Sibley chart going on. And it's really quite amazing. So I wanted to combine it here, first of all, with the January 6th, the votes counted, that's the original chart. Like I was saying before, that was the date that the votes were counted at the college, electoral college, and that's when the vice president gets to announce. And so obviously that was coming up. What none of us spotted was that Mars at the right at the end of Aries, the Antarctic degree, and very, very powerful, and for the last time there. And squaring, it turns out, the US Sibley charts secondary progressed Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, which I think is stunning. So every time Mars was going back and forth as it has been last year, it's catching that degree, but they're not going for it. And it says this time at that degree, on that day, it gets it. It's quite amazing. And also what was going on was the secondary progressed US chart. Is it the moon is at 2 degrees 39 Aquarius. So so there it was, conjunct Saturn at 2 degrees Aquarius, squaring the Mars, and obviously they're giving and squaring Venus in the secondary progressed chart in Taurus. Again, that's Venus, very strong Taurus Venus in its domicile, which is opposed to Saturn in the progressed chart too, at 2 degrees Scorpio. So there you go, you've got that T-square, this really powerful T-square getting, it's like a fuse being lit, like a bomb going off right on time, which is just incredible. So, and you can trace it to actually that when the votes were counted, 1 o'clock, and that's when they have been counted, and that's when the vice president is meant to announce it. Well, that's obviously when Trump started talking, having, felt betrayed by Mike Pence, having just announced that the winners were the Democrats, was Joe Biden. And so he makes this speech, and then that sets it all off. And then the fuse is lit, and Mars at that point it's going forward. And by 2 o'clock, which is when they actually entered, they stormed the building, was when it was just about, it was just on the tip of going to Taurus, but it didn't, but they stormed the building at that point. So it was right at the end of Aries. Incredible. By 6 o'clock, it was over, and it was at 6 o'clock when Mars actually entered Taurus, right on time. And it was when Mars entered Taurus and made its square to the moon, the progressed moon, and to transiting Saturn. That transiting Saturn, representing the government, said, okay, that's it, it's over. And at that point it was. And so I thought that was quite an amazing chart. What else was there to look at? There's so much. I mean, the nodes in 26, the secondary progressed nodes, 26 Capricorn, Mercury at 27 Capricorn, transiting Mercury was right on those nodes, right on the transiting MC on midheaven, Mercury right up there in Capricorn. So the government was always going to bring a halt to this. Obviously, like Chad said, it could never hope to, the insurrection could never hope to win, but it made its point. And you have to say there is a very fated quality to that, as though it's a great shame it ended in violence, some violence. It could have been a lot worse, actually. But it made a huge point, and it's as though it sort of had to happen. And it even perhaps happening then, it diffused what could have happened later on when actually Mars, being conjunct Uranus on the inauguration date, it could have been, if the inauguration had gone ahead as planned and it had happened then, how much worse would that have been? So it's as though the government stood in, and that was it. Incredible. So anyway, I think I'll move on from that, because there is more to say, but it's not much time. So anyway, moving on. So again, that's Mars going into Taurus. As I just said, it moved into the 8th house as well of the chart, and of the progressed chart. And that's Mars ingress Aquarius, as it was, like I said before, it was on actually at the hour that Trump was won the presidency back in 2016. So it's just lined up perfectly, as you can see. Even the house Taurus, 0 degrees Taurus, in the progressed chart is right there, and it was getting hit every time, So again, a huge sort of destiny going on there. Yeah, so we'll go on from that to the next one. Uranus at the top of the chart too. Wow. So Neptune square the nodes, which is coming up very shortly in exactitude. It's coming up on the 26th of January. So it's as though this is culminating then. We've got this T square that picked up, Trump's chart, Trump's sun and moon eclipse, and Neptune is going to be exactly square the nodes. And the nodes, it will be at 19 degrees Pisces. So what again is amazing is the next new moon. I mean, it's in the dark phase of the moon at the moment. The Sibley chart, the secondary progressed US chart, is, as I said, it's at 2, the moon is at the moment, it's 2 degrees Aquarius. So it's been moving through Aquarius. I think it's, I made a note of since when, 2000, okay. I made a note somewhere, but never mind. Anyway, it's only just really in Aquarius. It hasn't been there for long, a couple of years, I think. Anyway, so it's going to meet with the sun, the new moon. So it's in its dark phase now. It's finishing up its cycle. So it gives you a feeling that this is, it's finishing up. So it's like we're learning, and America center stage is learning. The rest of the world are pupils too, but star pupils, America, is learning to go over the past. And as Chad said, the Civil War, the prejudices, the slave trade, it's all coming up. And that is mirroring the world. I mean, it didn't start with America, obviously, that all this was, you know, ancient. So this has been in the world, when you think of this, for thousands of years, all this prejudice and this hierarchy and this subordination and subordination of you know, supremacy of races, and not just the white race sometimes, but a lot the white race, obviously, in the last few centuries. So now it's as though we have to go over this past before we're ready for Aquarius. So that the moon is in Aquarius, the secondary progressed moon is in Aquarius, but the new moon will be in Pisces. So that's what we're heading for, and that will be in 2024, March 2024 to be exact. And at that point, Neptune also in the chart, in the Sibley chart, secondary progressed chart, will be at 25 degrees, 26 degrees Virgo. So it will be trining and sextiling the progressed nodes as well. So there is a very, it's as though Neptune really, yes, Pluto is center stage here, and so is Uranus, and so Saturn, but it comes down to Neptune, and probably beyond that, obviously, the outer planet Eris. But Neptune is as though we have to go over this Piscean, we haven't done with it, and we haven't come to terms with the duplicity of it, with the double standard of it, with how we have pronounced ourselves spiritual, and that we, you know, like Christ is white, that sort of thing. We have pronounced ourselves, I mean, even the gods were white before then. They've all been white, except of course in India and etc. But we made God white, and we made, so we've done that. So we haven't come to terms with all of that. And it hasn't really, we're not really fit to go into the new age before we've gone over that. So it's that we have to do our homework. We're redoing our homework, and then we get to the new moon in Pisces. And at 19 degrees Pisces, which is where the Neptune coming up will be when it T-squares the nodal axis on the 26th of January. So, and this empathy, as Biden was saying in his, I mean, all his language, he was saying about ideals, truth and lies, and this on civil war, referencing the Civil War. Someone described him as empathetic. And then that wonderful song, A Land of Hope and Dreams, that Bruce Springsteen sang at the cenotaph. Wonderful. So it's a battle for truth. And so that seems to be what, so we have this, so it's really marked out this period from when Neptune squares the nodes, 19 degrees Pisces, and then ready for the new moon in several years' time, in, well, 24, several years' time. And that will be obviously the year of the next election. So it's quite incredible. And I just wanted to do the Sabian symbol of that. I'll go on to the next one. I don't have time to mark out all the things on there, but that's the main thrust of that. And I just wanted to mention the Sabian symbol of that for 19 degrees, because that's so important. And what it says is, a student, let's see, hold on. A master, 19 degrees Pisces, a master instructing his pupil on guiding and being guided. When the student is ready, the master appears. So it's about seeking out the advice or the knowledge you need. This is literally or figuratively a case of being in a teaching, learning situation. This symbol is a strong confirmation of the rightness and auspiciousness of the situation. It's instructing you to obey and be true to whatever you are teaching or being taught, to who is doing the teaching and the learning. And yeah, wonderful. So yes, Neptune has two sides, obviously. It's showing truth and lies, and it's showing prejudices, but also it has the spiritual side, the empathy, which we saw rise out of the mire of lies. And that's hugely hopeful and inspiring. So anyway, what I wanted to finish on was the full moon. It's the next. And so after we've had on the 26th, we've had the Neptune T-squaring the nodes. We have the full moon on the 28th, which is at 9 degrees Aquarius. Sorry, 9 degrees Leo, sun in Aquarius. And amazingly, you know, when Biden and Harris were inaugurated, I mean, at 10 degrees Taurus, was the rising sign, and Mars at almost 11 degrees. So Mars was rising, yeah, but Mars is rising in the spirit of, yes, we're going to get this done, we're going to put it right, we're going to, so that side of Mars suddenly switched to, we're going to get the job done, we're going to go for the higher ground, and just like a rocket, you know, Jupiter, Uranus, as Chad was saying. And then there's that wonderful Jupiter-Sun conjunction on the full moon. So representing it. So it's amazing because, you know, there was such a danger of violence and the prejudice is overrunning. I'm not sure that's going to happen. It obviously could happen in pockets. It's still a dangerous time, but it's really over really. As I think, you know, as Mitchell was saying, oh no, it's Daniel was saying, one of you was saying, it's really over. So the supremacy is gone, really. This is it. It's on its last legs. It's out. But we're going to see its dying throes, obviously, and we might see quite a few of those first. But I thought that was hugely inspiring. And yeah, so I'll finish on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Michaela. Yeah, I love how you said, how you talked about the bomb going off right on time. I mean, that Saturn conjunct the moon in Aquarius, let's see. So it was the secondary chart. The moon was on the secondary chart. The Saturn was on the transit. And yeah. Absolutely. Exact conjunction. You are so right. Bomb went off right on time. You know, referring back to that Aquarius and Taurus in the 9th. You know, the 9th house can sometimes offer some luck, good
right.
fortune, and being in Taurus, you know, casualties were minimized. We don't want to discount the casualties that did occur, but it could have been worse, as we all say.
True.
Yeah. And as far as the Neptune squares the nodes, yeah, the resolution node is the south node in Sagittarius in the 9th house in your chart that you shared. And and so yes, the truth, that is the resolution point, is coming to the truth from all of the widespread misinformation that we've been grappling with.
Yeah.
So So that will be interesting, and I look forward to that very much.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you, Michaela. That was awesome.
Thank you, Stacie.
And next we have Mitchell Lewis. Welcome, Mitchell, from New York, from Manhattan.
From Upper East Side Manhattan. I have a great view of the East River right from my window.
Beautiful.
So first of all, a couple of things. I'm going to go through some PowerPoints, but only a few. We have a limited amount of time. But I want to point out a few charts that I think you guys will find interesting. And many of you know that I do financial astrology. I was dragged kicking and screaming to the floor of the Mercantile Exchange many years ago. And they said, come on, you're going to make money. I said, oh, wait, money? I'm a musician and astrologer. We don't know from money. So I learned a lot about the markets, but I learned more about astrology from being on the floor because I got a chance to see astrology work on a grand scale every day because I went to work 5 days a week. And I would sit there and watch how the markets were moving and follow it in my ephemeris and make my notes and cotton and Deutschmarks and yen and the stock market and oil and whatever it was. So when I look at things, mundane astrology, you know, world events, which I do a great deal of, and I like it. I've been doing it for many years, and I do a lot of lectures, and I go on coast to coast fairly, you know, a couple of times a year. And I get a chance to say what I think is going to happen in advance. We all like to look back. It's great. Well, as the joke goes, now 2020 really is hindsight, you know. So the first thing that comes to my mind is this. There's an old saying, if you give a loaded gun to a child and he points it at you, who's to blame? We have 360 million guns, many of them automatic weapons, in the hands of American citizens because of a misinterpretation of the Second Amendment and because of the power of gun rights activists and the NRA and the rest of it. And they'll shoot dozens of children. Doesn't move the needle. They shot up. Some guy shot up in Las Vegas. The concert, and oh my God, the carnage was unbelievable. Didn't move the needle. Didn't matter. But they brought guns into Congress, and they tried to get the government people, and they're banging and they're shooting, and people are killed, and this might move the needle. Now, I'm not suggesting by any means that everything is going to be suddenly wonderful. I don't think that's the way humanity works. I don't think we change until we're in pain. When the pain becomes too much, you're smoking for 45 years and you cough every morning, but it doesn't matter. And then the doctor says, by the way, I saw a little something on your x-ray. If you don't, oh my God, I'm going to quit. I give up. I give up. So we change when we absolutely have to. All right, let me see if I can bring up this PowerPoint and do the screen share. I believe this is it. Okay, let's hope for the best. Okay, so this is America's. I like the Sibley chart. Most of us use it. Some people still don't, but that's okay. February 12th, 2022. Oh, I'm sorry, it's supposed to be here. February 2021. Which is where we are essentially now. Pluto is coming up to the Pluto. Neptune is beginning the opposition to Neptune. Uranus is creating a 30-degree angle to Uranus. Now, 30-degree angles or semi-sextiles work the same as an inconjunct. They are not attached by triplicity or quadruplicity. This is what makes inconjuncts so important in health reads. I've been doing medical astrology for many years, and I find the inconjuncts are incredibly important when you're dealing with a health issue. They're distractions. So what happened was we were distracted, so to speak, and there was an attack on the Congress. And as a result of that, tens of thousands of troops protected the inauguration. So the inauguration went by peacefully, thank God. Next year, Pluto return, and of course this is tropical astrology. The Pluto return is complete Neptune is just about in opposition to the Neptune. So I'm going to go through these slides quickly. I don't want to waste a lot of time on them. In a longer presentation, I would be analyzing them a little bit longer. Here's the chart of the influenza epidemic when it started in March 1918. A few troops got sick in Kansas, and most of them recovered. A few died. They shipped them off into the trenches, which was an incubation place that a virus can only dream of. And when this influenza began, Saturn was conjunct Neptune. Neptune rules infectious diseases. Saturn, of course, is the repressive energy. So what did it do? It repressed the virus. It was bad, but nobody knew how bad. And when it was over in France and Germany, in the trenches, it mutated, as viruses do. But at the beginning of it, it didn't look all that bad. What happened at the peak, in October, they knew that the war was ending. They decided, as most of us know, to end the war on the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th month, because we could never have a war like this again. Mankind had come to a point where he would not survive, and they did a pretty good job until they grew another crop of troops 20 years later and started another war. Here, Saturn is in opposition to Uranus. Now, I know that Neptune rules infectious diseases, but the point is that the Saturn was sitting on top of Neptune in the first chart, repressing the growth of the virus. Here, Saturn is now in opposition to Uranus. I don't want to go through the mythology. The Uranus was the father, Saturn, child.
Mitchell?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you go to full screen, please? The charts are great. I want to be able to see them.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Great.
All right. So, okay. So here we had Saturn conjunct Neptune, and at the beginning of it, and here is Saturn in opposition to Uranus. And the difference, of course, is that Saturn representing the stability, and Neptune is over here doing its thing. I'm not going to even bother with what Neptune was doing, because Neptune did what it was supposed to do at the beginning. It created this pandemic. Saturn in opposition to Uranus exploded it. The estimates, the pandemic lasted 2 years, from 1918 to 1920. And the estimates are between 50 and 200 million. They honestly don't know, because they don't know how many died in India. They weren't keeping records. Some estimate as many as 100 million people might have died in India over this summer. And so straight through 1919, this pandemic continued. And of course, what they told you to do then was wear a mask, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet away. And people were rioting and throwing their masks in the streets and burning them and carrying on and saying, you can't take away my rights. So humanity doesn't learn that quickly. After this pandemic, we had a 2-year depression, 1920 to 1922. Most people don't know it because they don't study the history of the markets. If you trade, you worry about where your stocks are. I do this for a living and for part of my career, so I do that. Now, the beginning of COVID-19, Neptune was in sextile to Jupiter. Now, we think of hard aspects as being bad and good aspects as being good. I don't think that way. When you have an aspect between two planets, Jupiter equals Neptune. The fact that it's a sextile means that you can work with it more proactively. It doesn't force itself upon you the way a conjunct or an opposition or square will, but it's still an incredibly powerful combination. So what happened at the beginning, February, which obviously probably even started earlier, we're not sure when this actually started, but this is when we became aware of it. It started to explode. But because it was a sextile, it was kept more or less contained. Italy had a big breakout. New York State had a big breakout. The rest of the world was kind of, it'll be better. Don't worry about it. And here's the second wave. I drew this chart up when I was going on coast to coast last March. And I'm going to show you a little thing that they put up on their website towards the end of my talk. I know I have only a little bit of time, so I have to rush through this. Now, I wrote, COVID-19 second wave ? In February. Why? Because Saturn isn't square to Uranus. What happened in the second wave in 1918? Saturn was in opposition to Uranus. Okay. Doesn't mean that every time that an aspect comes along, you can expect the same thing. This is what makes astrology. If it was that easy, we could all become great astrologers in a year's time, and it doesn't work that way. You need to keep an eye on it, and you don't separate astrology from history or from life. Here's the Dow Jones from 1896 to 2016. These are all the recovery periods of the recessions that we had. There was a panic in 1907. I'm going to get through this very quickly. It led to a very, very severe depression worldwide. Here's the Dow from 1900 to 1920. See, when you look at the Dow like this, it looks like it always goes up. When you separate it into 20-year periods, you get a much better idea of how people lived through those times. They didn't have 401ks, but everybody was investing in the stock market. And this is what controlled the railroads and the buildings of cities and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, this is what money makes as the world goes out. So here's the crash of 1907. It's a pretty bad crash. Here is the beginning of the First World War. Very bad crash. But what happened right away? Well, war is very good for business. Not very good for people and animals, but it's very good for business. So when people say to me, why is the stock market rallying? That shouldn't happen. That never happens. I say to them, you're wrong. You don't study history. It happens always. What do you think rich people do when the stock market crashes? They buy it. It's the middle class that gets caught up, that gets lost. Oh my God, my retirement fund, and they call their brokers and they get out at the worst possible time. And so here's the beginning of the First World War. Here's the First World War. Here's America getting into the First World War in 1917. And it rallies all the way up to here, 110, which for the Dow is huge. Now, of course, it's 28,000. Here's the influenza of 1918. Comes right back down to the bottom that was hit here. I wish I could move this thing out of the way. You probably can't see what I'm looking at here, but something is interfering. Okay, here's the Dow from 1920 to 1940. Here's the end of the Depression of 1922. And the markets, that's when the Roaring Twenties start. And I think that's what we're heading towards. That's why I'm bringing all this up, and I want to get through this quickly again. Here's the crash of 1929. It's the one everybody knows about. My God, look at terrible crash. Here's the crash of 1931. It was 5 times deeper. It took out the bottom of everything, except here's the crash of 1930. Here's 1929. Here's 1931. And it comes right back down to where the crash of 1907 happened. This is called support. We have very short attention spans. We live to be 80, 90 years old. If you're really unlucky, 100. But the markets have a much longer attention span. And they come back and they test these bottoms. And it held. And then from there, in the middle of the Depression, the worst time humanity's ever seen, stock market goes up for 7 years until the Roosevelt recession of 1937. So when people say to you, why are the markets up when we have a pandemic and we have this in the economy? It always does. Look at the history of it, you'll see. Here's the crash of 1931. Saturn is in square to Uranus. You will see a hard Saturn to Uranus aspect in most stock market crashes. Not all, nothing is 100%, but most of them. Here's the New York Stock Exchange's chart. Born on Dennis Hopper's birthday, May 17th, 1792. I rectified it to about 10 o'clock in the morning. And they got together under the buttonwood tree on Wall Street and said, we should have our own stock market, everybody else does. And they created the New York Stock Exchange. This is the grandfather of American stocks. This is the chart I always use. I look at all the other charts when I'm trading. This is the chart I use astrologically. And look what happens with this square. It sits right on top. This is the meat of the New York Stock Exchange. It's got a Saturn moon conjunct in opposition to Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter and Neptune was that? It's illusion. Nothing real with Jupiter and Neptune. What do the stock markets trade on? They trade on psychology, which is why I was able to trade almost from day one when I got on the floor of the exchange, because I had been an astrologer already for decades. And I said, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. These markets are all over the place. I'm looking at all these. It's like being in a great casino where you can pick up the phone and piss your money away. And I started to recognize that there was connections between how the markets trade and astrology, because there's a connection between how the markets trade and psychology. So we have this big buildup of energy. The crash of 31 takes out the stock market completely. Here is 1960 to 1980. I don't have a lot of time to go through this, but what happened was Saturn was in opposition to Uranus in 1965 to 1967. And it led to a 16-year bear market. Every time it tried to make a new high, it collapsed. Every time it tried to make a new high, it collapsed. Every time. This was a period, I don't have time to go through each of these. This was a period when you could get 12% interest on your checking account. Think about that. You sit home, you got a few $1,000s in the bank and you don't need it, and it's making you 12% interest. Now, if you buy bonds or you buy a CD, you're getting 1% if you're lucky. 12%. My God, the S&Ps often don't return 12%. It was such a ridiculous period of inflation. And it was the Saturn-Uranus that created it. Here's our favorite, today, my favorite topic. I have a couple of nemesis in the astrology community who are ranting and raving not only about Trump, but about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to go to $100,000. It's the future. We're going to do away with money. It's all Bitcoin. And I say to them, no, it isn't. This is when Bitcoin started, January 3rd, 2009. I don't remember where I got the 6:15 time. It was in Dublin. It was born under a Saturn-Uranus opposition. Look at the way Bitcoin trades. This does not trade like a currency. Currencies trade in a basket with other currencies. The dollar goes up a little, goes down a little, it changes. We have a civil war, whatever happens, stuff against the pound, against the euro, against the yen. This is what we call a bubble. Here is Bitcoin just in the last couple of years. It really did nothing until 2018. It runs all the way up to 20,000. And what happens after that? Well, I happen to have been on Coast to Coast, and I told George Noory that this thing is going to collapse. And it dropped 75% of its value. Then it rallies all the way up. Oh my God, look at this. And here is Bitcoin from December, from 25, a little bit under 23,000. And look at how it ran up to over 40,000 a coin. Then what happens? Of course, it drops down. It lost 25% of its value in a matter of a week. And then it rallies back up again and it goes back and forth. This is a bubble. Every time there is a bubble, Neptune is involved, because Neptune is illusion. Okay. Neptune right now, because we all know where the planets are, is in Pisces about 19 degrees. Neptune is sitting right on top of Bitcoin's Uranus, which rules all technological things, and in opposition to Saturn, which rules all structure, financing, banking. So Neptune is creating this huge bubble that Bitcoin is going into. Now, if you buy a bubble at the right time and you get out, good for you, you're gonna make a fortune. If you don't get out in time, you're gonna get your ass handed. That's what happened in the dot-com bubble. That's what happened in the silver bubble. That's what happens in stock bubbles. That's what happened before the crash of 08. That's what happens. That's what we're about to see. Okay, so here's the New York Stock Exchange again. And here's February, the chart that I first showed you, 2021. What do we got? We got that Saturn-Uranus square right on top of the New York Stock Exchange's Venus. Here's well, Christmas Day. I thought it would be an interesting day to take a look. 2021. Now we got Saturn in square to Uranus again. And by the way, just go back to this chart for a second. At the same time that we had the Saturn Uranus on Venus, we have Pluto setting off this big meat of the New York Stock Exchange's chart. Christmas, we've got the square again, but we have by now, oh, one more thing. I'm so sorry, there's so much to cover. I keep forgetting. We also have Neptune opposite Mars. In 2008, 2005, I started to predict that there was going to be a massive stock market crash. It was going to be because of the housing bubble, because Saturn was traveling through Cancer. Saturn rules the outside of the house. Cancer rules the inside of the house, or the home, and the furnishings, and the tchotchkes, and the paintings, and the rest of it. And as soon as Saturn left Cancer in July of 2005, I had been predicting already that that was going to be the top of the housing market. And it was. That's the exact top of it. If you look at the timing of it, you do a little homework. And then Saturn was about to oppose Neptune. And that was it. That was the end of it. And in 2008, Saturn opposed Uranus. Remember, in 1965, Saturn opposed Uranus, with Uranus being with them being in Pisces and Virgo, but in the exact reverse of where they were in 2008. And it fell exactly, I don't have the chart here because I didn't want to overwhelm us, but it fell exactly on the New York Stock Exchange's Mars. And my rectification gives Mars the ruler of the 10th house of career and status, and it wiped out the stock market. It was one of the worst crashes in our history. Now, what are we leading to another crash? Well, you don't separate astrology from life. What prevented, in March, we had a terrible crash in the markets, but the markets almost immediately started to recover. Why? Well, Donald Trump wanted to get reelected. So the Feds poured hundreds of billions of dollars and puffed up the stock market artificially. Then they had a big stimulus package. They handed out all trillions of dollars to corporations and to people, and people got extra unemployment funds, and so they stabilized it. And what happens when times are tough, the stock market goes up? We had what they call a K recovery. The rich get rich and the poor get children. And that's what happened. So we are facing another potential crisis here. Now, I am not predicting that this is going to be a massive stock market crash. A lot has to do with how the government does it. What is the Biden administration going to do? What is Janet Yellen, who's back in that seat again, how is she going to handle this? If they handle it well and they do a huge infrastructure bill and they're able to pass it through Congress and they put 20, 30 million Americans back to work with great jobs, we may be able to avoid this, because sometimes we are capable of avoiding what I see as potential stock market crashes throughout history. Most of the time we don't. So this is simply a warning that we are at a point where, and everybody's got 401ks and maybe you trade or whatever you do, my finger's on the sell button every day. I'm waiting to see what happens. The second that I see something I don't like, I'm getting out of a lot of my stocks and I'm buying what I call post-pandemic stocks. AMC movie company, because as soon as the pandemic's over, people are going to go running back to the movies. Stock is trading at $2, $3 a share now. It's worth investing a few dollars into it. If I'm wrong and it goes out of business, I lost a few dollars. If I'm right, it's going to go up to $30, and it's going to be a 10-to-1 trade. I'm buying JetBlue. I have some marijuana stocks. I like Macy's very much. Okay, I'm not here to give you stock tips. I'm sorry, this is my bio, but I just wanted to read you this. This is what was from March, and this is on their website. With the pandemic, I think we have to find a balance between hysteria and complacency. Doesn't do any good to panic. Lewis warned that in 2021, with a Saturn-Uranus square, there will be a bounce back of the virus as there was during the 1918 pandemic, which had a similar astrological picture. Regarding the election, he believes Joe Biden will be the Democratic candidate, and because people are in panic mode, the voters will prefer Biden in the general election as he projects a return to normalcy. Donald Trump, he added, has some very negative astrological aspects in his chart that year. Now, forgive me, I'm blowing my own horn. I know it's not necessary to do, but Okay, I'm gonna stop doing that. We don't need that anymore. So as fast as I could get through, that's what led us to where we are here. Astrologically, why the pandemic is in its second wave, why the economy is shaky the way it is, again, astrologically, and what I think we can expect over the next year. I expect what I've been predicting for several years was that 2020 would be terribly volatile. And it was, but there was a huge dip, and then artificially they raised it up. And 2021, if they do not handle it properly, we're going to have a series of corrections. I'll call them corrections. A correction is 10 to 15%. A crash is 20% or more. There could be crashes, there could be corrections, whatever it is. What do you do if that happens? Well, depends on your age, depends on whether you're going to need that money over the next 6 months. If you have money in the bank and you're not worried about it, or you're young, you leave it there. If the markets don't come back, we're going to be eating each other. There's going to be nothing left because the whole world is based on the stock market. If it doesn't collapse and or sometimes, look, I got people out of their stocks in 2008, before 2008, and I couldn't get them back in. So they lost out on that huge run-up. Warren Buffett didn't make a dime after the crash of last March. He didn't get back in the markets. It's interesting. I saw him on CNBC recently. And he admitted it. He said, well, I missed a big opportunity. Doesn't matter. He can afford to buy lunch. So again, I thought it would be interesting to look at the financial end of it. And I think that we have to be very, very cautious in the coming year. And if Biden does what I think he should do, if he's allowed to do it, and he doesn't have too much of a fight in Congress, we can avoid a major collapse. But these markets are ready for a correction, and we're going to see it. More likely than not within a month or so. And if not then it's in June when the second square is, or in December when the third square of Uranus and Saturn is. Okay, I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitchell. Wow, that was fascinating. I haven't studied the markets very much myself, and so it was extremely interesting to see how that pattern, when you hit a high and then it just like
Stacie, I'm putting together a webinar of my own, which I do periodically, and I do it on Zoom, in which I go much more into depth in the history of the markets, going all the way back to the tulip bubble of the 1600s.
Awesome.
So, and you'll see patterns that are absolutely fascinating. And I've been putting together a book on it. If I live long enough, I'll finish it.
Well, I will definitely plan to view that webinar. That sounds amazing. It's, it's an interesting time that we're in. Things are very volatile, and it's like you say, there is an opportunity to put innovative solutions into place, and hopefully, with all of these planets in Aquarius, that will occur.
Well, I just want to can I make just one more point, and then I'll.
Sure.
We have two tunnels under the Hudson River, the Holland Tunnel and the Lincoln Tunnel. They were built a long time ago. About 30% of America's finances, of America's money, goes through those two tunnels. It connects New England, upstate New York, Canada, all of that through to the rest of America. In Hurricane Sandy, one of them, I forget which one, was damaged so badly that they were frightened to use it. So they tried to push through a bill to build a third tunnel so that then they could repair the other two, because you have much too much traffic. I mean, Amtrak goes through there and millions of cars go through there. And Chris Christie, who was governor of New Jersey, refused to do it. And if we don't do an infrastructure bill, huge FDR type building, this country is going to fall apart. I'm afraid to go on tunnels. You can't imagine what the New York City subway system is like. It's antiquated. Everything has to be rebuilt. The highways, all of it. Okay, so that I just wanted to make that point to show you how important some of these things are and how connected they are, and how we do need the financial markets to live in the world we live in. If you want to live in an ashram and eat a bowl of rice, you don't care about the stock markets. If you're living in America, even if you don't own stocks, those stocks are changing your life day to day. So, okay, I'm sorry.
Indeed. No, don't apologize. It's all
Love your doggy.
I know. Yeah, well, you know, with Uranus in Taurus, this really does kind of signal a time where innovation can be applied to rebuilding foundations. And then, of course, we have Venus in Capricorn. So hopefully that bill will come to pass, uh, and then, yeah, we can fix all of this stuff that's been put off for so long. I also, you know, one thing that you said back when you were talking about COVID-19 and how there was a Neptune sextile Jupiter, and how, you know, positive aspects can, or, you know, a sextile can be assumed to be a positive aspect. But there's, you know, one thing, you know, Jeffrey Wolf Green taught is that if you have a positive aspect and you don't do the work, because it's so easy, because there's a lack of pressure, it can lead to laziness.
That's
And
what happened.
and with that laziness, then becomes a stressful result. So
Also complacency. And the
yes,
Trump administration refused to deal with the pandemic when it started. And so
exactly.
here we are.
Yep, here we are. And that was a gentle aspect. So don't ignore your gentle aspects, people. Okay, all right, let's move on to Sue Hillyard. Welcome, Sue.
Hello. Well, I'm going to do something a little different than I've done before, but still detail intensive, as is my usual. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to talk about asteroids, and for those who want to take a screenshot, these are some of the asteroids interpretations. But I'm not going to talk about all the charts I talked about before. So I'm going to skip all of those. And this is all the stuff I've talked about before. And what I am going to talk about is the insurrection and Trump's continued perpetuation of his lies about the election being stolen, and Stop the Steal rally on January 6th led to a deadly insurrection at the Capitol on the day when the electoral votes were to be counted and recorded. This was supposed to be just a business as usual type of transaction. But instead, you know what happened. So anyway, Bill Moyer's website has published a timeline of the horrific developments of events as they occurred that day, because there were so many exact times mentioned there. Of course, I wondered about the astrology and started looking into it. I've added the astrological details here in red. The day started with Junior whipping up the mob, which Giuliani then continued. Right after asteroid chaos went into the third house, Rudy said, "Let's have trial by combat." Venus and Sagittarius passed over the midheaven. Then Chiron and Aries rose over the ascendant. While Trump spoke, the Capricorn sun passed over the midheaven, and at 12:15 p.m., Mars, in the final minutes of his own sign, conjoined the ascendant at 29 degrees Aries, 54 minutes, and then the ascendant moved into Taurus. These are the kinds of things he was saying that incited them to violently take over the Capitol building. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. We won this election, and we won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so, because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All Vice President Trump has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people. At 12:28 p.m., asteroid Hybris was conjunct the Capricorn midheaven. And at 12:30 p.m., as Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri entered the Capitol for the joint session of Congress to certify Biden's election, he gives a thumbs up, a fist pump, and a wave to Trump's mob. A few minutes later, a stationary retrograde Uranus came up over the horizon. Here's the chart for when asteroid Chaos was on the IC and had just moved into the third house with Neptune rising. Sagittarius Venus in the 10th is conjunct part of Fortune and the galactic center as Junior and Rudy instigate the mob. You can see everything here in the 10th house waiting to cross over the midheaven as the day progresses, as well as those that will pass over the ascendant. The joint session of Congress, scheduled for 1 p.m., has Caraclo and Capricorn conjunct the midheaven. It began as the mob moved from the rally to the Capitol. Notice all of the bodies that are lined up in the 10th house, waiting their turn to go over the midheaven. The legend shows the symbol for each one. In addition to Caraclo holding space, we have asteroids Lilith, Hecate, Osiris, Horus, Isis, George, Arizona, and Abundantia. Arizona's votes were the ones being objected to when the session was interrupted and members had to take shelter. At 1 p.m., as Trump continued his rant to the mob, some members of the crowd had already reached the Capitol building. An initial wave of protesters stormed the outer barricade west of the Capitol building. As the congressional proceedings begin, Pence reads a letter saying that he won't intervene in Congress's electoral count. My oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority, he said. 1:04 p.m., Moon was opposite asteroid Coronis. Asteroid Caraclo exactly conjoined the midheaven as she held space. 1:09 p.m., DC Capitol Police Chief Sund asks for an emergency declaration and to call in the National Guard. 1:11 p.m., Trump ended his speech by urging his followers to march down Pennsylvania Avenue, saying, "We fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to the Capitol. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country." At exactly 1:11 p.m., the midheaven went into Aquarius. And here's the chart when the midheaven switched over to Aquarius. So in addition to it traditionally being ruled by Saturn, we also have Uranus. I've eliminated a few of the asteroids and added 3 that could refer to Mike Pence. Mike Penston, Penco, and Penza. Asteroid Penco is close to Pence in spelling, Penza in sound, and Mike Penston is close to his name. Interestingly, Penza occupies the same degree as the recent solar eclipse that was opposite Trump's sun, and Penco is in the 7th house here, conjunct Juno and Sag, as his former partner unleashed the mob after invoking his name. Mike Penston in Leo here falls in the middle of Pence's natal Mars-Uranus conjunction. Here's Pence's chart with the progressions and transits for later that day when asteroid Mike Penston came up over the ascendant. It's shown here in his 11th house between his Mars and Uranus, which are in balsamic phase natally as they were in the sky that day. His part of fortune progressed to a conjunction with natal Mike Penston. Transiting asteroid Penco is between his progressed 3rd house Astrea and Mike Penston. Neptune astrology says that Astrea represents moral values, reasoning, and good judgment, and she suggests that Astrea in the natal chart shows how we weigh up the options and choose the best course of action for us that fits into our moral values and beliefs. The mob was definitely hunting him down that day, yelling about hanging him, which must have been absolutely terrifying. It will be interesting to see how this affects him in the future. 1:21 p.m., Saturn conjoined the midheaven. From a Department of Defense memo at 1:26, the Capitol Police ordered the evacuation of the Capitol complex. 1:28 p.m., Jupiter was conjunct the midheaven. By 1:30, the crowds outside the building eventually overtook the Capitol Police and made its way up the Capitol steps. Suspicious packages, later confirmed to be pipe bombs, were found at Republican National Committee headquarters and Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington. Reports are that as the attack unfolded, Trump was pleased and disregarded aides pleading with him to intercede. Ben Sasse of Nebraska said that according to Trump aides, he was delighted while walking around the White House, confused about why other people on his team aren't as excited. Trump initially resisted requests to mobilize the National Guard. Another DoD memo at 1:34 documents that DC Mayor Muriel Bowser asked Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy, who reports to Miller, for more federal help to deal with the mob, but was told that the request must first come from the Capitol Police. The ascendant moves into Gemini and the communications escalate. At 1:49, the Capitol Police Chief asked the commanding general of the DC National Guard for immediate assistance. Also at 1:49, Trump retweets a video of the rally, which includes his previous statement that we will stop the steal. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to be strong. 1:51 p.m., Pallas was conjunct the midheaven. 6 minutes later, Black Moon Lilith was conjunct the ascendant. 2 minutes after that, Sun received the first report that rioters have reached the Capitol's doors and windows and are attempting to break at least one window. Moyers noted that shortly after 2 p.m., while the senators were in a temporary holding room after the Senate chamber is evacuated, Trump attempted to call a call to Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, but mistakenly reached Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who hands the phone to Tuberville. Trump then tries to convince Tuberville to make additional objections to the Electoral College vote in an effort to block Congress's certification of Biden's win. But the call is cut off because senators are asked to move to a secure location. 2:01 p.m., asteroid Penco conjoined the descendant. By 2 o'clock, Mike Pence had crossed the IC into the third house. Penza was in the seventh, and Penco was about to descend into the sixth. Notice that all of the Capricorn and Aquarius bodies, except Arizona and George, have crossed over the midheaven and are now in the ninth house. Asteroid Hygeia in Leo moved into the third house as Juno conjoined the descendant. Text and email alerts to all congressional staff warn those inside to stay away from windows and those outside to seek cover. 2:11, asteroid Astrea conjoined the descendant. In addition to talking about moral values, as I quoted previously, according to straightwoo.com, Astrea also signifies staying until the bitter end. While this may show someone with perseverance, the asteroid Astrea more often indicates someone who stays in a bad job, relationship, friendship far too long or doesn't know when to let go. Asteroid Astrea also symbolizes the astrology of the situation. 2:11 p.m., Trump's mob breached the Capitol building, breaking windows, climbing inside, and opening doors for others to follow. 2:13, Pence suddenly left the Senate floor and was moved to a nearby office. 2:14, rioters chased DC Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman up a flight of stairs and arrived on the landing near the office where Pence and his family are hiding. Goodman ran the opposite direction, luring them away from Pence and the Senate chamber. 2:18 p.m., another text alert went out to Capitol staff. Due to security threats inside, immediately move inside your office, take emergency equipment, lock the doors, take shelter. Around 2:20 p.m., hiding in a barricaded room, members of Congress and their aides make pleas for outside help. Among them is a senior advisor to Mitch McConnell, who reaches a former law firm colleague, Will Levy. Levy had served as Attorney General William Barr's chief of staff. From home, Levy then calls FBI Director David Bowditch at the command center of the FBI's Washington field office, who dispatches the first of 3 tactical teams to the Capitol. DOD memo at 2:22 p.m., Army Secretary McCarthy discusses the situation at the Capitol with Mayor Bowser and her staff. They are begging for additional National Guard assistance. Note the time. It's been almost an hour since Bowser requested help. At 2:23 p.m., as asteroid Psyche came up over the ascendant, Trump tweets, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones, which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. Psyche is the Greek word for soul, and asteroid Psyche is the place in your chart that can detail for you where you can find your entrance into yourself. Psyche also represents psychology and is involved with the discipline of the study of the mind. Psyche encompasses the soul, the mind, and the self. This is the psyche of Donald Trump still holding on to the lie, tweeting his vice president under the bus. Where are we at time? Should I stop now and do the rest of it later?
Either way, you decide.
Well, this is a good stopping point.
Okay, let's stop then.
Okay, why don't I do that?
Okay. Yeah, that was incredible, Sue. Oh my goodness. I really appreciate how you broke it all down, by the minute, and your asteroid correlations are extremely interesting. One correction I think I need to make is when you said that Trump tried to call Senator Tuberville, it was actually Rudy Giuliani.
Well, Giuliani was later. Trump did it first.
Oh, really?
Then, yeah, I've got that in later. Yes, Giuliani did it later.
Okay,
the same number.
I was not aware of that. Oh my goodness, how crazy.
Yeah, and later he left a message.
Yeah, right.
Which is the evidence they have now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that officer, that Capitol Police officer, Eugene Goodman, I remember seeing that play out, and I just thought, what is he doing? He's like alone. What?
At first, they were saying, that he was he was committing treason or something because he was running from them.
Yeah.
Then to find out, he was.
Yeah. Then
he knew what he was doing.
What a hero he was.
Yeah.
Because I've heard that there were still senators in the chamber. I don't know if that's true, but of course you had Mike Pence there, and they had just barely gotten him into safety before that crowd rushed up on the landing. And what a brave man. I mean, that man needs a promotion.
Yeah.
So, oh, thank you, Sue. So we're gonna talk to you again before we're done. And next, let's go to Daniel Fiverson. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Stacie. I just have to interject. I love your dog. What's his or her name?
His name is Sam.
He's great. He's great.
Thank you. I love
Yeah,
him.
yeah, great. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. I don't think it's working. Wait a minute here. I've got two monitors here and it always confounds me. So I'm going to unplug the other one. Let's see what happens here. All right. All right, so this is a quote from a Japanese author. I love title pages because I think it kind of gives us a jumping off point and it gives me a focus. And this is just so apropos. It just when I found this, I said, "Oh my God, this is what I have to use." And he said, "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in." And actually, I have a second one too, that I think works. And I think that they really, kind of define this time space. Those of us who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Watching the inauguration, I saw Libra rising. I'm going to kind of take myself off here because I am reading kind of this and I'd rather just read it. Watching the inauguration, I saw Libra rising in beauty for equality, balance, and unity. I saw Venus reaching out to a future that is inclusive of all Americans, regardless of race, creed, and culture or color. And I saw the courage of Mars meet the world to say, we will take responsibility and repair the damage that has been done. We have once again shown the best that our country can be and achieve and hold aloft once more the torch for liberty and justice. President Biden also iterated so honestly and eloquently as a nation, our work is clearly cut out for us. Excuse me. Though the political structure of our country dates from the time of the American Revolution, the modern American character was shaped by the end of the Civil War. In Ken Burns' classic documentary, The Civil War, historian John J. Chapman makes the statement, quote, that there has never been a moment in our history when slavery was not a sleeping serpent. It lay coiled up under the table during the deliberations of the Constitutional Convention. Unquote. At the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the drafting of the Constitution, there were 500,000 Negro slaves in the American colonies. Think about it. 20% of the people in the United States were owned by someone else. 12 US presidents owned slaves, and they included Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, and 7 others. On the 200th anniversary of the ratification of the Constitution, Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American to sit on the Supreme Court, said that the Constitution was, quote, defective from the start. The framers left out a majority of Americans when they wrote the phrase, "we the people." The framers of the Constitution believed that concessions on slavery were the price for the support for ratification of Southern delegates for a strong central government and for its ratification. The US Constitution is a document that was written strictly to protect property rights, not individual rights, and slaves were considered to be personal property.
Daniel,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Can you go to full screen?
I am not on full screen.
No, No, you're showing your presentation and it's,
Really? Oh, on
yeah.
my computer, I am on full screen. I don't know what to do here.
If you go to view
I know why, yeah.
over to the left, the down arrow way to the left at the top
How's that?
under
No?
view. I'm not seeing it full screen.
All right, so where are you saying I should go?
Or maybe change the zoom. Your zoom is at 26%.
Well, I'm on my laptop and it's full frame here, so it's kind of hard.
Are you seeing your presentation?
No, I'm just seeing this slide that's playing.
Oh, that's interesting because we're not.
Oh, you're not seeing my slides.
We're seeing your slides, but it's not full screen.
Interesting. All right, let me just see what I can do here. Bear with me. Sorry about this. This happens whenever, and I took the second monitor off. Maybe that will help. I don't know. I think it will actually.
Yeah, now it's full screen.
All right, you like it? Good.
Yep, great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
all right, perfect. All right, I didn't think this would work because it wasn't showing me my notes, but that's perfect. All right, so let me skip to where I was here. So the American Civil War erupted over the issue of slavery as 11 southern states seceded from the Union. At the end of the Civil War, the Reconstruction Acts sought to restore racial equality, but over time, reactionary forces, including the Ku Klux Klan, reversed the changes in a violent backlash that has lasted to this day. Over the last 250 years, the racism of slavery has simply turned into segregation, and we are now confronted by that awakened serpent. We are currently moving through the tumultuous waters of the second Neptune opposition, which has already occurred in May and August of 2020 and will perfect once more in March of this year, according to the chart that I use, cast for the day and hour that the American Revolution actually began. From 1856 to 1857, the US experienced its first Neptune return when Neptune last transited at 20, where we are now at 20 degrees of Pisces. As the country expanded westward and territories applied for statehood, the serpent of slavery began to uncoil. Political violence and dissension ignited regarding which states would be free states and which would be slave states. Bleeding Kansas was a series of violent civil confrontations in Kansas territory between 1854 and 1859, which emerged from the debate over the legality of slavery in the proposed state of Kansas. The conflict was characterized by years of electoral fraud, raids, assaults, and murders carried out in the Kansas territory and neighboring Missouri by pro-slavery border ruffians and anti-slavery free staters. About 56 people were killed during the violence. It has been called the overture to the American Civil War, which immediately followed it. At the heart of the conflict was the question whether Kansas, upon gaining statehood, would allow slavery. Dred Scott versus Sanford was a landmark Supreme Court case of the 19th century. The court ruled that Black people were not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which the instrument provided for and secures to the citizens of the United States. We're also experiencing the onset of the US Pluto return, which will perfect for the first time in 1 month. On February 18th, 2021, then again on July 10th and Christmas Day 2021. Over the past 250 years, the US Pluto cycle has unfolded, generating significant events in American history. The first quarter square occurred from 1846 to 1847. This was the period of manifest destiny, westward expansion accelerated by the gold rush, and as the western territories of California, Arizona, and New Mexico came into the Union after the Mexican-American War. At the Pluto opposition from 1934 to 1936, the Great Depression unraveled American life, and this period was the run-up to World War II and the rise, excuse me, and the rise of, I'm sorry, I'm having technical issues here. It was a run-up to World War II and the rise of fascism, not just in Germany, Italy, and Spain, but also here in the United States. There was a core element of individuals and organizations whose agenda matched that of Adolf Hitler. The American hero, Charles Lindbergh, was a major voice for American support of fascism in Europe, saying that, quote, Europe and the entire world is fortunate that a Nazi Germany lies at present between communist Russia and a demoralized France. The last quarter square that occurred from 1981 to 1982 brought the conservative revolution of the Reagan years and the emergence of cohesive, well-founded groups seeking to reverse the progressive advances of the past. One such organization that was founded in those years was the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank that has had significant influence on US public policy making and is considered to be one of the most influential conservative public policy organizations in the United States. Another is Koch Industries, dedicated to using coordinated wealth and power to create a network of structured power aimed at controlling public policy. I have visited the area. Susan's family lives in Wichita, a mile from Koch headquarters, and it has a very unsettling resemblance to the Death Star. It's this huge black cube that sits out in the middle of this 3 or 4 acre lot. And it is so incredibly scary just to drive past it. The energy that exudes from it is unbelievable. The transit of Pluto in Capricorn, conjoining US Capricorn, is and will continue to cause and release the evolutionary energies and precipitate dramatic and long-term changes to the structure of power in the United States. The day the mob ransacked the US Capitol, transiting Neptune opposed US Neptune. It was an act of extreme political polarization by alleged patriots who played out the roles of martyr and or savior alike. Their outrageous conduct arose from a deep sense of political disempowerment and exclusion. They crossed personal and public boundaries that have never been crossed before. The transiting lunar nodes in Gemini Sagittarius squared US Neptune in Virgo as Neptune opposed US Neptune, forming a mutable grand cross. Crises unfold that expose the contradictions, false truths, falsely placed beliefs, the illusions of American society, and in the American character itself, both from the perspective of the disillusioned mob, as well as the traumatized observers witnessing the carnage. The exposure of cloaked shadows opens the potential for long-term, compassionate, collective healing to begin. Transiting Eris, retrograde in Aries, was in a last quarter square from US Pluto in Capricorn. This doubles down on the impact of the ongoing historic transit of Pluto square Eris, adding evolutionary impact. It also supports crises that generate national deconditioning, unexpected rebellion, anarchy, national fragmentation, mass trauma, and other chaotic events in order to generate forward evolutionary movement. Transiting Uranus and Taurus trines US Eris in Capricorn and creates opportunities for all versions and expressions of individuation and egotism, but also creativity and self-reliance. Unexpected, chaotic, sudden events that cause disruptions to the normalcy, forcing the awareness of the necessities of life. Transiting Chiron in Aries opposes US Saturn in Libra and it generates disruptive national wounding whose intention, again, is to heal the wounds of separateness and create collective events that expose our national shadow. And transiting Chiron squares Eris, creating the need for a radically new healthcare system. Transiting Saturn forms an air grand trine with US Saturn and US Jupiter Uranus and presents opportunities to rework the past and create a present and future that are more conscious and expressive of collective responsibility. There can be a freeing from the restrictions that have been imposed over time and the ability to create a new consensual reality based on equality, fairness, and brotherhood. The stars are telling us that we're turning a corner, but that we still have a hard road ahead. COVID is mutating at record levels and going higher. The climate has become feral. Families are in crisis. Our children are being denied their best educational opportunities. Our overseas friends have become acquaintances, and our acquaintances have become enemies. It's not all bleak. We are identifying the toxins in our world and are removing them. But we alone are responsible for all that has gone bad. The good news is that as we come together as community, we can find the remedies we need. For too long, we've lived in a world where we believe that someone will come to fix everything: our washing machine, our automobiles, our hearts, and our souls. The storm we are surviving is making us stronger than we seem to be able to do on our own. The good thing is that now we are aware of it, and we are fixing that problem too. The other good news is that Bernie Sanders, as chairman of the Budget Committee, will see more stimulus. We will see more stimulus and perhaps even move towards universal basic income. The chaos created by COVID can lead us toward universal health care. The exposure of centuries of racism and xenophobia can lead to a new period of enlightenment, brotherhood, and mutual support. One question I hear a lot is, how long will all this go on? Many astrologers use predictive techniques to determine the future. I have always personally held that astrology is not necessarily best served as a predictive science, because the choices we make in the present are what will determine what the future will bring. It's not just as above, so below. It's also as within, so without. The current historic square from Pluto to Eris is the last major outer planet event until 2024. Pluto will also enter Aquarius in 2024. Uranus will enter Gemini in 2025, and Neptune will enter Aries in 2026. All of these archetypes hold historic records of both greatness and calamity. As a disclaimer, I must state that given what we know about DJT, we cannot assume he's down for the count. How it will all unfold is our collective dream, and there are still dreamers in the field who revel in their nightmares. The Pluto-Eris square that I have been reporting on since 2015 is the most important celestial event in our current time frame. There is not time or place in this report to elaborate, so if you want to know more, I encourage you to visit my website for evolutionaryastrology.com for information. Blessings for peace, safety, and well-being. Thanks for listening. Namaste.
Namaste, Daniel. Wow. Yeah, we have an incredible history. And, I appreciate what you were saying about what you appreciated when you saw the inauguration with Libra rising and Venus there in Capricorn, because we do have an unfortunate history of slavery and different people of different races being marginalized, and really it has just all come up to a head, and I think that we're gonna tackle it. It may not be perfect, but I think we're gonna make an evolutionary leap. You can even, just in Joe Biden's first day, he made a number of executive orders that speak to this, which, you know, well, he stopped the wall, he stopped the building of the wall, he strengthened DACA, he ended the Muslim travel ban. You know, we're back in the World Health Organization. We're back in the Paris agreements. There's a lot of things, and the moratorium on evictions, that's important as well, because a lot of people in these, you know, Black and Hispanic races are disproportionately affected. And, you know, by appointing all of these, you know, people who come from, you know, people can look to them and say, that looks like me, and they can have a voice for people who have not had any kind of voice. And so I think that your moment of what's the word I'm looking for?
This is why I write it all down.
Yeah, no, you really just hit the nail on the head when you said what was being birthed in that inauguration. There is a rising of equality and unity, and it's just beginning. And, you know, we'll see how far we get. There's a lot of work to do.
But we have to remember, we can't leave it to President Biden. We can't leave it to Congress. It begins with us. It begins in our local government. It begins in our state governments. It takes a lot of movement to change the government at a federal level, but we can change it where we live. We all change it with our astrology. We change it by reaching out and speaking our truth. We each individually need to act from our own moral compass and not expect somebody else to come and fix this and say, it's okay, we have a new president, everything's going to get better. It comes down to us. Nobody's coming to save us, Stacie. We have to save ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. And, you know, with that Uranus in Taurus ruling all of these planets in Aquarius, you know, Aquarius being a symbol for a more humanitarian way of living, it looks good. Yeah. So
yeah, it's where we have to go. I mean, that's it. The truth is that regardless of you know, day-to-day history, we're moving in that direction. You know, I talk about the yugas and the precession of the equinoxes and the 26,000 year cycle. Well, we're at the inconjunct point of that cycle. Okay, that's where we go. We're in the gibbous phase. Okay, and the gibbous phase is requiring integration. We have to get out there and get our hands dirty. There's no other way around it.
Indeed, the goal being adjustment in that aspect. So yeah, I don't know, it feels good to me. So thank you, Daniel. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and now we're going to hear from Sue one last time.
Okie dokie. Let me share my screen. Okay, so this is where we left off. And so we are at 3. Okay, here we go. By 311, asteroid Penza was conjunct the descendant. It has now been more than 90 minutes since Mayor Bowser first asked Army Secretary McCarthy for assistance. It took an hour for Defense Department officials to meet and another half hour for them to decide to help. And Bowser still doesn't know the status of her request. 2 memos state that Pelosi and Schumer called One, called Army Secretary McCarthy, who says that Bowser's request has now been approved. And two, Army Secretary McCarthy called Bowser to tell her that her request for help had been approved. The Defense Department's notification of approval to Bowser came 2 hours after her request. While Miller and his team were slow walking Mayor Bowser's request, she had sought National Guard assistance from Virginia Governor Ralph Northam and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. At about the same time, Speaker Pelosi called Northam directly for help, and he agreed. Asteroid Karma moves into the third house with Mayor Bowser's request to activate the Guard, and Asteroid Chaos came up over the ascendant the same minute that McCarthy phoned Bowser. This chart shows early Pisces on the midheaven, Penza on the descendant, and all but Pallas of the Capricorn and Aquarius placements have moved into the 8th house. Karma is very close to the IC. Chaos is approaching the ascendant, and the North Node has risen over it. At 3:29 p.m., Governor Northam announced mobilization of Virginia's National Guard. But there's a hitch. Federal law requires Defense Department authorization before any state's National Guard can cross the state border onto federal land in D.C. That approval didn't come until almost 2 hours later. A DOD memo at 3:47 p.m. says Governor Hogan mobilized his state's National Guard and 200 state troopers. The Defense Department repeatedly denies Hogan's request to deploy the National Guard at the Capitol. As he awaits approval, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer called Hogan from the undisclosed bunker to which he, Pelosi, and Schumer have been evacuated. Hoyer pleads for assistance, saying that the Capitol Police is overwhelmed and there is no federal law enforcement presence. 4:02 p.m., Ceres was conjunct the Pisces midheaven. 4:17, Trump tweeted a video telling rioters, "I know your pain, I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us, blah, blah, blah. So go home, we love you, you're very special." 4:18, DOD memo gives voice approval to notifying surrounding states to muster and be prepared to mobilize their National Guard personnel. 2 minutes later, Neptune was conjunct the midheaven. And 8 minutes after that, Vesta was conjunct the IC. At 4:32 p.m., Miller gives verbal authorization to remission the DC National Guard from city posts, where most have been directing traffic and monitoring subway stations, to conduct perimeter and clearance operations in support of the Capitol Police Force. 4:39, asteroid Atlantis is conjunct the IC. Remember, Atlantis speaks about hubris. 4:40 p.m., more than 90 minutes after Governor Hogan had requested federal approval to send his state's National Guard troops to D.C., Army Secretary McCarthy called to ask, "Can you come as soon as possible?" Hogan responds, "Yeah, we've been waiting, we're ready." 4:57 p.m., the sun set over the descendant. 5:13 p.m., asteroid Hybris, also hubris, set. 5:21, Chiron was conjunct the midheaven. 5:27, Mars went into Taurus. 5:34 p.m., Pluto conjoined the descendant. 5:40, the first DC National Guard personnel arrived at the Capitol. DOD memo, 5:45 p.m., Miller signed formal authorization for out-of-state National Guard personnel to muster and gave voice approval for deployment to support the Capitol Police. The first Maryland National Guard personnel didn't arrive at the Capitol until January 7th, the next day at 10 a.m., and the first Virginia National Guard members arrived at noon. 5:49 p.m., Mercury set. 5:55, Caraclo went down over the ascendant. 6:01 p.m., Trump hubristically tweeted, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." 6:13 p.m., Saturn was on the descendant. 6:20, asteroid Coronis was conjunct the midheaven. 6:22, Jupiter conjoined the descendant. 6:27 p.m., Eris was conjunct the midheaven. 6:32, Moon conjunct the IC. 6:40 p.m., asteroid Mike Pence came up over the ascendant. 6:51 p.m., Pallas conjoined the descendant. 6:52, Mars in Taurus was conjunct the midheaven. At 7 p.m., Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, intending to call Senator Tuberville, but like Trump 5 hours early, reaches Senator Lee. Unaware that he's reached the wrong number, Giuliani leaves a voicemail message that said, "Senator Tuberville, or should I say Coach Tuberville, this is Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer. I'm calling you because I want to discuss with you how they're trying to rush this hearing and how we need you, our Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislatures to get more information to you. I know they're reconvening at 8 tonight, but the only strategy we can follow is to object to numerous states and raise issues so that we get ourselves into tomorrow, ideally until the end of tomorrow." Yikes. Here you can see everything that had moved into the 6th house. Eris and Coronis had gone over the midheaven, and Mars was right at the midheaven with Uranus following him. Meanwhile, as people were all hunkered down together in a confined space, with many unmasked, here comes Hygeia to the ascendant. And not too far behind is Karma in Virgo. So far, at least 5 members of Congress have tested positive for COVID since then. 7:06 p.m., asteroid Hygeia conjoined the ascendant. 7:19 p.m., Uranus conjunct the midheaven. 7:29, part of Fortune conjunct the IC. When Congress resumed the session at 8:06 p.m., Tuberville votes in favor of objections to certifying Biden's election results in Arizona. At 8 p.m., the Capitol Police had declared the Capitol building secure. 8:31, after widespread media reports that Pence, not Trump, had actually given the order to deploy the National Guard, Kash Patel, Miller's chief of staff and former top aide to Representative Nunes, told the New York Times, "The acting secretary and the president have spoken multiple times this week about the request for National Guard personnel in D.C. During these conversations, the president conveyed to the acting secretary that he should take any necessary steps to support civilian law enforcement requests in securing the Capitol and federal buildings." But according to the Defense Department's January 8th memo, the only such conversation with Trump occurred on January 3rd. At 8:34, asteroid Nemesis was conjunct the IC. And 9 minutes after that, asteroid Karma conjoined the ascendant. That day, Karma was retrograde, minutes from Trump's progressed Atlantis. Hubris. He was swiftly impeached by the House for incitement of insurrection. And here's the chart for the time the verdict was reached in the House. With the 1st degree of Aries on the midheaven, new beginnings. Chiron, Coronis, Eris, and Mars all in the 10th house. It appears more likely with every grotesque detail that emerges about that day that he could be convicted in the Senate. If so, they could also vote to prevent him from holding office ever again. And finally, Joseph R. Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States yesterday. Interestingly, the ceremony was set for noon, but the swearing in occurred about 10 minutes early, which is unusual. Some astrologers have suggested that his staff had consulted an astrologer because moving the time back that amount put the moon 2 minutes into the previous degree and not in the anaretic degree, and moved Pluto into the 9th house instead of the 10th. So that way it would not, by transit, go over. I also noticed, for whatever it's worth, that Karma moved into the 5th from the 4th without moving Black Moon Lilith from the 12th into the 1st. Ceres was conjunct Neptune in the 11th, both almost exactly square the nodes. This points to the illusions, trauma, lies, loss, and grief that are coming up to be healed. The night before the inauguration, Biden conducted a memorial for all of the lives lost in the pandemic so far. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Sue. Wow. Thank you for all the work that you've done to just really break it all down.
Thank you. I was intrigued when I saw that Bill Moyers had the times. I mean, he had the times from a number of different sources, and so I thought, aha.
Yeah, it's very helpful to see how everything played out in its time, and it really is quite surprising how under or overwhelmed the Capitol Police were, and they weren't prepared. They had received warnings from the FBI and from New York PD, and they just still weren't prepared. And yeah, and it was a slow time coming. I guess you could maybe attribute that to the Mars in Taurus,
Well, Mars wasn't in Taurus until they actually arrived.
Okay, right.
When Mars went into Taurus when it was just being tamped down.
Right.
It was all.
But once that came into effect, the problem was handled, but it was a long time coming.
And it protected us from it happening, like somebody had said earlier, from that happening at the inauguration, which could have been disastrous. I mean, it could have been way worse. It all could have been way worse. We're so lucky.
Yes, indeed. And, I really like one thing you pointed out was karma moving into the 5th house. And, this is the house where we take charge. That's where you take charge. And from my eyes, that seems to have occurred. And, it's a big mountain that we have to climb yet. But I think we will. And so I want to thank you, Sue. Like, excellent, excellent, excellent work. You're a genius.
Well, keep talking. No. Thank you.
Oh, sure. And now I just want to open it back up to the panel, and, let's just talk about what our closing thoughts are on all of this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing, Mike Pence, by the way, the asteroid.
I know. Yeah, all three of them were close. I mean, so close.
Wow.
I debated whether to use all three of them, but they all tell part of the story, I guess.
Yeah. Incredible.
So what do you all think? What are your thoughts?
I think we all need to go home and carry wood and chop water.
Mm-hmm. Yep, do the work.
Right, do the work.
It's all pretty awe-inspiring, though, isn't it? It's just quite amazing. I mean, yeah.
Well, we chose to be here, so
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
It's true. And
and
you know,
think about the kids. I think about my 5-year-old granddaughter who's being born into this world. You know, it's just an amazing time space that we're passing through, and it gives me chills. You know, just to think about it sometimes.
Yeah.
It's inspiring. It's overwhelming. It's ponderous. But it's evolutionary. I mean, this is Pluto. This is what Pluto feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Incredible.
Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. I mean,
Yeah.
all of the above. It's, I mean, you're right. We chose to be here, and these are incredible times. And
Mm.
wow.
yeah, and we are on the, you know, we are about to have a metamorphosis. That's Pluto, you know. We
Mhm.
are metamorphosing how this country is structured, and getting a lot of the dirt that's underground, you know, out of the way, and hopefully creating something that will be more welcoming to all people, so that we can truly live our creed. Because, you know, that's the United States, that's the creed, is that all men are created equal. Well, all men and women are created equal. And I feel like we're about to make some pretty amazing ground in that direction.
Mm.
One
We're
thing,
we're headed back towards a golden age. It's just that it's still out there in the future.
yeah. Daniel, one thing that I noticed about the chart that you used and the Pluto return being this year, the dates that you mentioned seem to correspond with the Saturn Uranus squares.
Yes. Yeah.
Pretty closely, don't
It was it's the 18th of February. It's the Saturn Uranus square.
right? But and when is the Pluto return in your chart?
I'd have to bring it back up again because I can never keep dates in my head.
Yeah,
But the Pluto, we've already had 2 of the Pluto returns.
oh, okay.
That's the whole thing. There's one more coming. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. So one of
you know,
them, I guess,
when-
maybe
when I-
at the end of the year.
when I say that to some people, they say, no, it's next year. And I say, what is it you're expecting? You know, I mean, what do you think it's going to look like? This is it. This is this is it. If it's not Donald Trump, if it's not COVID, I can't imagine it being any more intense than it is. You know, it's just.
Is anybody going to say, hold my beer?
I got 20th of February 22 for the Pluto return.
You know,
Yeah, that's with the Sibley chart. But
yeah, I just love the chart. The chart that I use.
Oh, you use a number, yeah.
Ariel Gutman was living here for quite a while. Her mom passed. She moved back out to the Bay Area. But she collaborated with Jim Lewis, who was the realizer of astrocartography. And when she was cleaning out her house here, she had all these books that she wanted to sell and get rid of. And I picked up this book called The True Chart of the United States. And I said, "What? Tell me about this, Ariel." She said, "This is the chart that Jim Lewis thought was the true chart in the United States." The book is written for sidereal astrology, which is Greek to me. It's, you know, might as well be written in Latin. But every time I work with it, and I, you know, like look at these charts, the number of partile conjunction. Now, again, all, you know, astrology works, so all astrology works.
exactly.
And the 1776 charts work too, because they were cast for an important time in American history. But from my perspective, 1776 was the country's first birthday. They couldn't stand up on July 6, 1775, say we're free and independent. They were about to go to war with the greatest military force on the planet. A year later, they actually survived. And then they had you know, they were able to stand up and say, well, we made it. We are here. But it was that first year. They almost didn't make it through the winter at Valley Forge. So, you know, it's American history is just, you know, fascinating to begin with. but the time is actually from the journals of the Continental Congress. The Sibley chart it's all guesswork. It's, the Congress was not in session at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry for the Gemini chart. They were already in the bars, drinking beer. You have to look at the logic of some of this stuff. But there is truth to that July 4th date, because it was an important date in history that they actually said, okay, we made it. It was our first birthday.
Yeah, I think they chose it too because it was something to do with Sirius, wasn't it? The fixed star Sirius. Sirius is rising. It reaches its heliacal,
And Jeffrey's chart with Uranus rising again.
Of course,
it makes sense. You can work the astrology backwards, but if you have an actual, if you're 13 colonies and you declare war against your mother country, hello, you're not a colony anymore. I mean, it's by default you become a sovereign nation. It's really very simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On that date, they passed an act to bear arms, and the next day they hired George Washington as commander in chief. I mean, those are facts.
Yeah, that asteroid, George, that's not George Washington, is it, by the way? That triggered my memory.
Well, it's George. It's just asteroid George. So it can, yes, they can refer to George Washington, which I thought of when I saw that. It was up at the top of the chart, and he was going, oh my God.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was also prevalent in the George Floyd riots.
Wow.
And I also suggested it could refer to Demetra George.
Sure.
anybody that has the name George. Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm curious to know if anyone has any predictions on what the future holds for Donald Trump.
Federal prison, I hope. Either that or, a warm bed in Saudi Arabia.
Lawsuits, multiple lawsuits.
I mean, Neptune is T-squaring, isn't it? His natal lunar eclipse. So that's going to be tough. I don't think he's going to come back from that, really.
Well, and Pluto opposite is Saturn.
Sure. Well, he was impeached on that, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he was. Yeah. First it hit what? First it hit Saturn. First it hit Saturn, taking responsibility, which he never has done.
Sure.
And so he just got kicked for it.
Finally caught up.
Yeah, and then it's going to hit his Venus, a little more squarely.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think my thoughts are, he's going to be very busy defending himself.
Exactly. Yeah.
From all sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do we think he's going to come back into the political arena? What do y'all think about the Senate? What's going to happen in the Senate? Do you think they're going to convict, or?
We've already got a majority.
Yeah.
We have the Democrats have a majority.
Well, I think they have to have a
2/3.
2/3. Yeah.
Right. If it's a tie, Kamala is the deciding vote.
Yeah, but that's only 50-50. They need 2/3 to convict him.
Well, I think that there are enough disenchanted GOP members.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
George Romney being one. Politicians are all about self-survival. They're about raising the funds for the next election and staying in public office. So they're going to do what's best for them, and at this point, their best interests are really to distance themselves as far as they can from Donald Trump.
Oh, and the whole world is distancing. I mean, his his bank, his
yeah. I mean, all kinds of businesses. Yeah,
that's the Venus part,
Yeah, he's definitely being estranged.
Starting.
so-
He might have to buy himself a ticket on that trip to Mars.
But if he's convicted by the, SDNY, then he can't hold public office anyway. He won't even be able to vote. So
He's persona non grata.
he loses his right to vote as a felon.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't think about that until you just said that.
Well, and the Senate has to pass a separate resolution saying that he can't run for public office again after they vote to convict him.
Right. I'd like to see New York take him out.
So would I.
You can work on that.
I'm just happy that he's not going to be
Mitchell.
consuming all of the air in the press and generating, just doing anything to get attention. He's an attention whore.
Just happy I don't have to hear his voice again.
I know. I haven't been able to listen to it for 4 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been very difficult, and he's been pretty mean and pretty inappropriate and well, really inappropriate. So, now we have somebody who's coming in who has some decency, who has a sense of responsibility, and he seems ready to take it on. He's got a big job, and I go ahead.
Everyone who knows him says he's a good man.
Yeah, that's true, and that really does say a lot when so many people are confirming that. So
Yeah, it's what we needed. The
Yeah.
antidote.
yes, so we still got a big mountain to climb, but I think we're on the right path, and
Yeah, we've made a start.
yeah. So I just want to, does anyone else have any closing comments? No?
This has been fun. I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed hanging out with you guys for this series.
hmm I think
Yeah.
it's been an incredible series, just a lot of master work done here, and I just feel so much smarter thanks to all of you. So it's been an awesome ride, you all, and
Thank you, Stacie, for all the work that you have done to keep this all together and cohesive. And I'm sure there's a lot you and Linda have done behind the scenes. Both of you deserve a tremendous amount of credit.
Absolutely.
and thank you for mentioning Linda Johnson. Absolutely, she is,
God bless Linda Johnson.
God bless her. So okay, everyone, I love you all. Signing off.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.